welcome. You are listening to Hunting Pixels, the one and only official video game podcast of Culture Bob. I had hoped to get this out to you by Halloween, and as it turns out, it's not going to be the case. We're going to do a very special episode dedicated to, the spoopy times. Like I said, I wanted to try to get this out before Halloween, but I have not had a chance to do so. So it's going to be here now. Apologies on the sort of delayed time, and for the holiday of Halloween, my favorite holiday, I wanted to do something a little, I guess special would be the word for it. I wanted to talk about horror, obviously. But I was trying to think of ways to do this and make it, a little bit different. I didn't want to just come in here and give you guys like a rundown of like this movie is excellent and whatnot. No, I wanted to more so. I also didn't want to do a top 10, right? Because the top 10 would be, first of all, it'd be very hard. Like I know what my top 2 are, and I kind of know what my top 5 are, but that second 3, they swap in and out in different places. Just depending on my mood, depending on the last time that I thought about them or saw them or what have you. Everyone does top 10s. And another thing is, like, if I were to rank top 10 movies, I hate to be old man yelling at clouds, but, like, movies were better back in the day. They just were. So my top 10 would have consisted a lot of movies that had come out before, the year 2000. Maybe one would have breached the top 10, maybe. And it would have been a lot of older stuff on there primarily. Also, probably a lot of names that you have heard like a million times before. So I was thinking of the best ways to do this, and I came up with the idea that I would take 10 subgenres, and I would give you my number 1 pick, like my favorite within that subgenre. So these aren't going to go in any particular order, like they're not ranked by any means, because I'm a big fan of anthology movies, which actually, funnily enough, did not make the list of 10 subgenres. But I'm a big fan of anthology movies, so like my pick for like say Creepshow would rank above someone else's pick for like a zombie, because I don't like zombies as much, So what we'll do is I'll just kind of run through these real quick, and I'll give you guys a sense of what I think a good movie is, especially when it comes to the horror genre, and also maybe give you some places to start if you want to venture out. So that's what we're going to do right now. So I think the best place to start this is going to be with something a little bit light and airy. I'm going to go with my top pick for a... excuse me. Oh, gosh. That was wild. Okay. I'm going to go with my top pick for a horror comedy. And this is going to be Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This is let me make sure I got the exact date right. I think this is 2010. And Dale, yes, 2010. Tucker and Dale versus Evil. So Tucker and Dale is this comedy that I say it's a comedy. It has its moments of horror for sure, but it's mainly in the comedy realm. But it is this movie about these kind of like well-meaning hillbillies who kind of get mistaken for killers by this group of kind of like college students, and hijinks ensue. And a lot of what this movie does really, really well is it plays on misconceptions a lot, which I think like the main theme of the movie is sort of like I don't want to say misconceptions because I just used that word, but like it's misunderstandings, I guess, and sort of like judging a book by its cover sort of thing. It doesn't always work. There are definitely like, just for instance, the sort of like main like actual antagonist of the movie. You kind of get from the very beginning that he's like a bad guy, and that he's not like, it's not that he's not what he seems, it's that he's exactly what he seems. He immediately out the gate is kind of like, oh, okay, so he's a bad guy type thing. Yeah, but it kind of plays on that a lot, and does a lot of like really funny and interesting things where, like, if, for instance, one of the scenes is you have Tyler Labine. He goes up to the college kids. This is very early in the movie, so it's not really big spoilers. But he goes up to the college kids and says, you guys heading to the lake, and starts kind of like laughing off of the advice of his friend Tucker, and who's played by Alan Tudyk. They're both brilliant in this. Alan Tudyk especially is just excuse me again, gosh. He's very funny. But he kind of tells Dale, played by Tyler Labine, this is what you need to do in order to be able to talk to people. You need to go over and smile and laugh. And so he walks up to the college kids, and he has like a scythe in his hands, and he walks up to them and says, "Are you going to the lake?" And starts laughing. And in the context of what the college kids are saying, they're thinking to themselves like, "Oh my God, this guy's really creepy. He's going to kill us. He's, kind of like being a creep or whatever." But in reality, it's just this poor guy who has very low self-confidence, and he just wants to go over and kind of like talk to these kids. And that's what the movie really kind of like centers around. It's very, very funny. I do think that there's a little bit of a it doesn't, the horror bits, I'll put it this way, the horror bits don't necessarily work all that well because they're in service to the comedy. So in that way, it's kind of like a almost like a modern day Ghostbuster or Ghostbusters, sorry. Wherein, like, even the kind of scary stuff that happened in Ghostbusters, which that movie's not scary, but even the kind of like spoopy stuff was in service of the comedy. And that kind of works the same way here. And so it doesn't, it's more comedy horror than it is horror comedy. But the stuff that is in here really is fantastic. Like, there's a scene with a wood chipper that is just like, it's very gory, but it's very funny. Yeah, I really like this movie a lot. I think that even if you're not big into the horror genre, I think this would be an absolutely perfect way to kind of like dip your toes into the water, so to speak. Very, very good stuff. The next one is, I'm going to kind of put it out there because I think a lot of people do not like this genre, or subgenre, I should say. And that's going to be found footage. This kind of really got the big start with the Blair Witch back in '99, although technically it had been around since the '80s with Cannibal Holocaust, and even before that there were like inklings of it. But my pick for this was actually a movie that I watched on Halloween this year. It was this year's release from Shudder of the VHS franchise, VHS 85. So all of these kind of take place in 1985, and the whole conceit behind the VHS franchise is kind of like that this is a series of like found VHS tapes sort of thing. Or at least that was the conceit early on. It kind of has gotten away from that with the last two instances very specifically kind of being like one tape with like videos kind of laid over top of it. So like the framing narrative in this one is this sort of documentary about the scientists who are studying a shapeshifter that they call Rory, and it kind of interludes between the segments every now and then. And this actually has a really interesting thing because it actually has two segments that, like, I don't want to say piggyback off of one another, but like it wraps back around. It's like a 2-part segment. But yeah, every one of these really, 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 really worked for me in ways that, like, I have to be honest with you. I think that a lot of horror movies just aren't very scary anymore because the things that they portray, they don't necessarily make for scary content, if that makes sense. Like, depending on what you believe religiously, like possession movies to me don't really scare me anymore because I don't know that like I necessarily believe in that. And I think that the idea of the possession stuff is scary in the way that like werewolf movies are scary, where it's a loss of who you are. I think that idea is scary, but possession movies have been so played out that like I don't know that like they scare me anymore and stuff. You know, same thing with vampires, just all of that stuff. Found footage to an extent I feel like is that way, but like this was the first time in a very long time that I saw stuff that like actually I was like, oh, this is not like a fun horror movie. This is like genuinely unsettling stuff. And the very first segment of VHS 85 actually is that sort of thing that I was talking about, where you have these 7 friends. They are in a camper and they're going to this lake, and there's like these signs that warn them, you know, you're not supposed to go swimming. And so like the entire time you're thinking to yourself like, okay, so there's going to be something in the water. It's actually kind of like a really fun play on the Creepshow 2 segment. I forget the name of the segment in Creepshow 2, but where the kids go into the water and it's actually like there's a monster that's kind of like goop living in there. So yeah, it's kind of like a really fun play on that. But like, so you have these kids. They go out on a boat. There are, I think, 7 of them in total, and like 2 of them stay behind on the shore, and the rest of them they get out on the boat. And while they're out there, you know, kind of water skiing and learning all that stuff, they start getting fired upon from the shore by a sniper. And that, to me, is not only like super realistic, but is very, very scary. The idea that like you're supposed to be having a fun time and you're out on the water, and then all of a sudden your friends are being shot at and you're being shot at, and there's no escape from that because you're in the middle of nowhere and this person is trained right on you. That is a fucking terrifying idea. Like, genuinely scary shit. The ending of the segment kind of, I don't want to say does away with that, but like the ending of the segment, it turns out that like the water actually allows you to live. And even to an extent, I think that that is kind of like an unsettling thing, like where you, like the people who were on the shore, they're not brought back to life because they never took, they never got in the water. But like the people that did, they come back and they have to deal with the fact that they're still alive, even if they are like very fucked up. Like one girl's like jaw is just like hanging all the way off of her head. It's just barely attached, which is kind of like a funny visual gag. But like they have to deal with the fact that their friends are dead and that they're still alive. And I think that that's a scary proposition. Like I really think that that's something that's hard for people to deal with. Like survivor's grief is very real, or survivor's guilt, not grief. But funnily enough, that segment is followed up with like a sister segment or like a sequel segment where this family is hosting a celebration in honor of their teenage daughter, who films the occasion with her cousin, and they're all there to kind of like throw a party for her for quote unquote like popping her cherry. And the thing is that Ruth is the girl who murdered and shot at all the people in the boat. And it's a really scary look at like how people specifically in the United States treat gun culture and how they're willing to die for their ability to kill other people. It's really fucking harrowing. It's really unsettling how these people treat the use of guns. And I don't know. I think it's a very, very nice closer to that kind of storyline segment. There's two other ones that I feel like I don't want to say that they're lesser, but like there's one that kind of like it's supposed to be like a demonstration of like a virtual reality type thing, and it kind of I don't know how to say it. It's almost like a ritual, like a witch ritual where they're trying to summon like this god of technology. And I think that like it in some ways is again very scary in what it says about society and what it says about how we basically let technology run our lives. It is it's actually maybe my least favorite segment of this entire thing, but it still is one of those like, holy shit, this is very like of the essence and of the times, but also like is a thing that we could look back on with the context of, technology advancing so rapidly in the 80s that like, it's like, oh, they were dealing with this back then too. It's really, really interesting stuff. The last one that I'll talk about, and then we can move on from this, was Scott Derrickson's Dream Kill, and it's kind of about this detective who is getting these videotapes of murders before they happen, and it turns out that the videotapes are taped dreams from this kid who's kind of like having psychic visions of the future. That premise alone on its face doesn't sound all that crazy, but when you think about the idea of like what it says about stuff near the end and how the videotapes are shot very much like the Scott Derrickson also directed Sinister, and so he kind of had that I guess in the back of his mind where like these are kind of like the snuff films from Sinister, and it's someone like almost like shooting their sort of like thrill kill type thing, and the way that they're shot is harrowing. It's scary. It's genuinely like creepy. And the thing though about it that gets really kind of scary, I feel like, again, is at the end you find out who the killer is, and it's this white guy, and he is like the reason that like he's killing these people is because the woman at the beginning accused him of sexually assaulting her and stalking her, and then the second guy was the I think lawyer, if I'm not mistaken, was the lawyer of the person who was, or of the woman who had accused him. And it's kind of about how cops abuse their power, and about how like white men can more or less get away with anything. And it's scary, again, in a very realistic manner. And I think that that's what made VHS 85 for me one of my favorite viewings of this 31 Days of Halloween challenge that I did. It really nails all of the scares that it's going for, because the scares are real. It's really good stuff. VHS 85, I think, is my favorite in this series. And I think that if you like the idea of found footage and like the idea of kind of like bite-sized things, VHS 85 would be an excellent way to get into one of these things. Okay. Next up on the list, I'm going to do a genre that I am honestly not too fond of. I'm going to talk about zombies. I'm just not too fond of zombies because I feel like a lot of the a lot of the intrigue around them kind of died with The Walking Dead for me back in like probably around 2014, 2015 when it hit its like 4th or 5th season. It just kind of fell off dramatically for me, and I wasn't really into them. I also kind of feel like zombies are used to death as metaphors for other things. For instance, the metaphor of Dawn of the Dead is rampant consumerism. People are turned into zombies by buying stuff at malls and, what have you. And I think that that's, to an extent, worn out its welcome. But my favorite zombie movie ever, if you can call it one, is 28 Days Later. 28 Days Later is the British zombie post-apocalyptic movie from Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland, who I adore. Alex Garland wrote 28 Days Later, Sunshine, The Beach, Dread, and he more recently has done stuff like Ex Machina, Annihilation, and Men. But this movie is one of the few movies in the zombie subgenre, that I think is genuinely scary. Not just because, like, the zombies move fast and they're ultra violent and, like, they're not even necessarily eating you, they're just beating you to death. And that, to me, is a very scary proposition. But, like, it also is I think, very real look in many ways at the, how do I want to put this, like, loneliness epidemic. Like, I know that the whole movie actually stems from, like, I believe it was like the foot and mouth disease that was hitting Britain at around this time. But I kind of think that the disease that is a little bit more scary and is hit on in the character studies, or like the kind of character study nature of Cillian Murphy's character Jim, is the idea of loneliness. And it's actually kind of carried out through several of the characters, including, like, Brendan Gleeson and, like, his character and his daughter. And there are other things in here too that I think are genuinely scary, like the idea that, like, soldiers, when the shit gets tough type thing, people in places of authority will use that authority to hurt people. I think that's a very scary concept as well. Yeah, I just really think this is a really well-made movie, even though it is shot on, like, these mini DV cameras, and it looks very dated. I really think that it is more... I think that dated nature kind of gives it more of an authentic feel. It almost feels like you're watching something that was real, like people were actually experiencing this. And it's led by some really, really great performances. Like, Naomi Harris is excellent in this. Cillian Murphy is excellent. Brendan Gleeson, Christopher Eccleston, like, just across the board it's full of, like, really, really good performances. And it, like I said, it's scary in more ways than just, oh, zombies eating people. It's like very much, like I said, a character study that really provides a lot of unsettling imagery and thought-provoking sort of, like, scares. Very good stuff. Very, very, very good stuff. Let's move now to... I kind of want to take a second to look at body horror, which has been coming into vogue again recently. So my pick for the best body horror movie would be The Fly. And I think that The Fly works on a number of different levels. For the record, I am talking about the 1986 version of this. And not the... was it 1958 1957, something like that. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so this one is the one that is obviously kind of the one that everyone thinks about, but like this is the Cronenberg one. This is the one with Jeff Goldblum, and yeah, I really really dig this movie for a number of reasons, but probably the biggest one is that I think that a lot of what Cronenberg's work does is speak to societal ills of the time. And when you think about like the time that this came out, right, in 1986, we're going through the kind of like AIDS epidemic, and in many ways The Fly is a kind of like analogy for just like disease in general. Very specifically, I think Cronenberg has talked about how terminal conditions like cancer, and very very specifically like just aging in general, but like given the time period of the AIDS crisis and when this movie was released, I think that it's hard not to see that sort of parallel. And that's one of the things that makes Cronenberg just in general like a really great like visionary in the horror genre, especially for his time. But like it's what makes this movie scary is the idea that your body will fail you at some point. Your body will break down, and if it's with regards to AIDS, like, or cancer or anything, it is kind of a, like, you have to deal with your own mortality in certain ways. And I think that the body horror aspects of what Cronenberg was doing throughout much of his career kind of speaks to that in a lot of ways. And The Fly, for me, is just the best representation of that as a general rule. Because there is a lot of heart in here. There's actually like a really kind of touching romance and like, like really good characterization of things. But like, it's also filled to the brim with this kind of shocking imagery of like bodies disintegrating and things of that nature. And it's it's really good. And it's probably, well, it's arguably the best Cronenberg movie. And it's very arguably the best horror movie of the 80s. It's great. Really, really good stuff. I don't know any other way to recommend it. It's just, it's very good. Very good. Okay. Let's talk about werewolves. I brought them up earlier. Werewolves, throughout the horror genre have been kind of like, in a similar way to, zombies, have been metaphors for a lot of different things. But the biggest one, obviously, is the sort of like what's the way that I want to put this? It's been sort of a analogy for like losing yourself in a way. I guess that's the best way to put it. I mean, there are other ways in which it has kind of like manifested. But that's most of the time what lycanthropy has been like analogous to. So my pick for this is An American Werewolf in London from 1981. This one could have actually also fallen into the horror comedy angle because this movie is extremely funny and it's also I think outright scary in a lot of ways. The basic premise of the film is that you've got these two American graduate students that have come to the kind of like countryside of England to trek across the moors as a sort of, I guess, like adventure for the two of them. It's starting to get like nightfall and it's starting to rain. So they go to this local pub and the pub goers kind of grow hostile and have the two young Americans leave. And as they are leaving and crossing the moors, they get attacked by a beast that they, one of them dies and then the other lives. And then eventually, becomes the werewolf. The reason that I think that this movie rules for a number of reasons is because the whole premise of the movie, like the rest of the movie, it is a movie from, over 40 years ago. So you've had time, but I'm going to get into spoilers because I have to in order for what I'm about to say to make sense. But basically, the rest of the movie, David is haunted by images of his best friend who died, Jack. And Jack is telling him things about like, oh, you're a werewolf now, but like, you know what that means, right? You have to kill yourself because werewolves, they can't, they can't be allowed to live, or else things like what happened to Jack will happen to other people. And this movie, in so many ways, is very specifically about survivor's guilt. I kind of brought it up earlier, but it's very much David seeing visions of his dead friend, the carcass of his dead friend, and being reminded that he's a monster because he lived through the attack, is kind of like the whole premise of the movie. And that's kind of like what it deals with the entire time. And it is very much a metaphor or analogy for that exact thing. I love this movie, maybe an unreasonable amount. I think this is maybe my favorite, like, I don't know if I want to say it's my favorite movie of the 80s, but like it is one of my very, very favorite like horror movies of this era. I adore this movie. I think it looks gorgeous. I think that the performances across the board are very good. And I think that some of the scares are very, very, very good as well. I don't think that I was necessarily alone because it was made on a budget of like around $6 million and it ended up grossing $62 million. So it's, it made a pretty penny. But it is very scary. I think it is very funny in a lot of ways. And I think that the werewolf sequence, or the werewolf transformation sequence that's like about the middle of the movie, is one of the all-time great horror sequences ever made. I really think that the makeup effects are astounding. Yeah, I think it's a fucking excellent time. And yeah, it's good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Um, why don't we kind of stay in the land of mythological creatures, and we will take a look at vampire movies. Vampire movies are, again, I think they have been, vampires in fiction as a general rule have been very, very overused for metaphor. They've been used as metaphors for queerness. They've been used as metaphors for, like we talked about with The Fly, with sexually transmitted diseases, things of that nature. I think that they've been kind of like over. I don't want to say overdone, but it's something that like you kind of know what you're getting. And my pick for my favorite vampire movie is the Swedish film Let the Right One In from 2008. Yes, 2008. It's actually based on a novel, so it loses just a little bit of points for that in that regard for me. But I really think that like when you look back at where vampires were, especially in this sort of era, there hadn't been a really good vampire movie, I feel like, since probably Blade. But even Blade is kind of like different in a way. I think that like the last great vampire movie before that was probably Interview with a Vampire, which was 94. And I think that it really, really knocks it out of the park with a sort of like mix of really good storytelling, like really, really strong visual storytelling, and also like mixing in like really solid scares and gore with it. One of the things that I think, one of the movies we watched again this go around with the 31 Days of Halloween was the American remake, Let Me In, which I feel like really does a it's a very strong metaphor for capitalism during the time and everything that was going on with the 2008 financial crisis. I think that it is a lot more outright cynical, whereas this movie is, I feel like, very much like a I don't want to say that it's a sweet, because I think that there is like an undercurrent of sinister elements at work here, but I do think that like it tells a story about like loneliness, where it like society just allows people to feel left alone and feel left on their own, and about how love can actually like help you overcome that thing. Like I really don't think that it's any sort of coincidence that this movie is set during winter, and you have this child who is kind of left behind by his parents. He's bullied at school. Like you have all of these things that kind of like isolate him from the world, and then you visually all around him is nothing but ice. He's very closed off. He's very sad. He's very like just I don't know how else to describe it, but like he's very cold, you know. I think that there's no other way to really put it. And I think that the idea of like a young love really kind of helps that, and really warms it up. And I think that, like, also around this time, if I'm not mistaken, you had stuff like Twilight starting, which was also another, like, sort of like young people romance with vampires. Don't get me wrong, this is like 8 billion times better than fucking Twilight, which I actually probably shouldn't say that because I've never seen Twilight, but it remains the case that, like, I think that this movie is that it works really well with just about everything that it's trying to do. It is very sweet. It is very I don't want to say scary, but it is very I don't know, poignant, maybe would be a good way to put it. It is one of the best horror movies of the 2000s. One of the very, very best. Maybe the best. It's very good. Very, very good. I cannot recommend it enough. I also recommend Let Me In if you want to see, like, a good cynical version of that. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so that is, let's see, we did horror comedy, body horror, found footage, zombies, vampire, werewolves. So that's 6. We have 4 left. I'll try to knock these out as quickly as possible. Don't want to take up too much of your time. So the next one I think that I'm going to go with is alien horror movies. And let's be honest, there is not a better alien horror movie than 1979's Alien. You already know this movie. Everyone has seen this movie, and it is excellent. Just plain and simple. It's about, this staff of if I'm not mistaken, they kind of work on like a sort of like oil rig, but like for space. And they're making their way home. They get stopped by a distress beacon because they get woken up early. And then they incidentally bring an alien on board. Yeah, this movie is... There's been a ton that's been said about it, like it's the Jaws in space, or it's like a haunted house movie, but with an alien instead of a ghost. All of that stuff is true. The thing that I think is probably the reason that I think that it's the best is it's just scary. It really is. Like, there are so many things within this movie that feel like just transgressive in the best possible ways. I really, really fucking love the idea of people lying to you, and that's your downfall as like a group of people, which is kind of what this is. Like, Ash knows what the alien is, and yet still allows it to be brought on board and still live, and he lies to the very real humans that are on board in order to make a profit. I think that alone is saying a lot about it, but it also is kind of, in a weird way, a response to the growing sort of like... I don't think that this is necessarily the case, but I can understand looking at it like kind of like as objectively as possible. But the growing sense of sort of misogyny within horror, where it is the women who are dying, especially when they have sex, and it is the virginal sort of like heroine who is the one who overcomes the monster or whatever. Like that is definitely something that was growing out of the 70s, and very specifically started with or grew massively in popularity with the release of Halloween just the year before this. But I think that this is very much having Ridley be the strong female type. I think that speaks a lot to the sort of, I guess, mindset of the movie. It is definitely taking, already established horror tropes and saying, "Hey, this is actually not true. Like she's the badass. She's the one who is the winner here." But again, there's all kinds of stuff in here, especially with like the idea of H.R. Geiger being the person who kind of created the design, and how his sort of like art played into this. Like a lot of the stuff with his artwork is very sexual, and there's a lot of sexual imagery within this. Again, I don't think that it is really all that hard to kind of see the parallels between the sex stuff here and then Alien being a strong, powerful female woman. I just don't think that that's necessarily a coincidence. There's all kinds of stuff in here. All kinds of stuff. I think that it is just filled to the absolute brim with psychological overtones, with wanting to talk about things like I said, like sex, or wanting to talk about things like disease even. Alien is just a master fucking class of filmmaking. It is brilliant. It's one of the greatest movies ever fucking made. Fuck the horror genre, just period. It's one of the absolute best movies ever fucking made. Very, very good stuff. If you haven't seen it, fucking see it. It's excellent. Okay. We talked about it just a second ago, so let's get into it. My pick for the slasher genre is Halloween. There was a whole podcast I did on this for Culture Pop Selects before that kind of went defunct. I don't need to say much more than I said there. Halloween's one of the best horror movies ever made. It's my favorite horror movie. It is so effective in how simple it is. The entire premise is man stalks babysitters on Halloween night. You can't get much more simple than that. And between the effective use of the score in this, which is iconic, like you can't not know what the Halloween theme is, but from the use of that to the really beautiful cinematography with like the blues and the oranges and that fucking white mask that is just it's like the cherry on top of the fucking sundae. You can't say enough about this movie. I don't think. There, of course, is a lot to be said about the critiques of Halloween and how it kind of leaned into the misogyny a little bit, or even if it didn't, like it is in some ways responsible for that thing. You can't talk about how it had. You can't talk about this movie without talking about the impact that it had on the horror genre as a whole. Without Halloween, you don't have shit like Friday the 13th. Without Friday the 13th, you don't have shit like A Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, like, the entirety of 80s horror cinema is indebted to this one movie from 1978. I don't think that you can get away from that. in any way. The entire like slasher genre, you know. I really think that it also needs to be talked about how pioneering it was with what it was doing. This is one of the first movies to ever use Panaglide, which was like the successor or the precursor to Steadicam. I mean, it basically was a Steadicam, but it was a different thing. It's a long story, film history. But like the use of like ultra wide angle lenses to make everything seem like so much bigger than it actually was. The compositions, this movie is full of frames that you could take and they could be pictures that you hang on the wall. Even like the opening title it's so simple, but like very effective, where it's just a pumpkin. It's just orange, black pumpkin. You know, that's it. And as the camera kind of like closes in, the lights within the pumpkin kind of go out. It's just, yeah, I can't say enough about this movie. I think that it is purely and simply excellent. It's my favorite horror movie ever made. Yeah. Yep. Okay. We're down to our last two. Let's talk about the one that most people, I think, would associate with horror. Ghosts. Obviously, ghosts are... and this can kind of be like the sort of like tie-in with haunted house films, although I put ghost here very specifically because my pick here isn't necessarily about a haunted house, although it is. But my pick for the ghost subgenre is poltergeist. Poltergeist is a movie that I adore. It is one of my favorite horror movies of the 80s. It is one of the reasons that I think I love horror so much. This is a movie that I saw continuously as a child. Yeah, I think that this is part of the reason that I love Spielberg so much. This is very Spielberg. The scary stuff doesn't start really happening until about the halfway point of the movie. There is like obviously some stuff near the beginning that kind of sets everything into motion, obviously, but like the movie really starts to get good and scary near the midpoint. And I really think that a lot of the movie is set up with family drama at its core. And like, I think that a lot of it comes down to a sort of like, I don't want to say commentary, but like it's very much looking at a very I don't know how to explain it, but it kind of is taking a look at the quote unquote average American family and then kind of like deconstructing that a little bit by saying, well, what happens when you lose someone within that, right? It's saying a lot about that, but it's also kind of in weird ways taking a look at like the American dream, where the American dream isn't always really that great because the American dream can be corrupted by forces outside of your control. This whole movie, literally the plot of this movie is you have this family who is at the I guess forefront would be the best way to put it, but the forefront of this housing community that they refused to move headstones from the cemetery that they built over. Or not refused to move the headstones, but they didn't move the bodies. They didn't move the graves. So they were very, very much, more concerned with the sort of like capitalistic intent of building houses, as opposed to whether or not you wanted to respect the dead. And in turn, that puts pressure on the family and their American dream of like having the house and the kids and the perfect family, all because of someone else's mistakes. I think this movie has a lot to say, and I think that it is very scary. It is that fucking clown scene is responsible for so many of my traumas. It's unreal. This movie works for a number of reasons, not the least of which is Tobe Hooper's like just excellent direction. I love the Spielbergian touch. Like, you can see his fingerprints all over this. He was definitely very involved. He didn't direct this movie. That whole fucking thing is ridiculous. People are crazy with that. But I think it would be undeniable to say that his fingerprints aren't all over this. Yeah, Poltergeist fucking rules. It is, in no uncertain terms, a very frightening movie with some very, very good visuals and a very strong core story. Very good stuff. All right, we're down to our last one, and I talked about it a little bit at length at the beginning. I want to talk about possession movies, because these have been sort of the bread and butter of the horror genre since The Conjuring came out in 2013. I mean, you could make the case, I don't think that you should, but I think you could make the case that even earlier with the Paranormal Activity series, because those movies, they were ghost tales, obviously, but oh gosh, but they also had the sort of elements to be considered possession movies. That's the best way to put it. Yeah, since 2013, I think that like possession movies have become sort of the bread and butter of the genre. That's kind of where a lot of it has gone, That said, I think the greatest horror movie ever made, and my pick for the possession movie, is The Exorcist from 1973. I think that the scariest movie ever made is The Exorcist. I think that this movie is scary even if you are not into the idea of like religious things. I think that the stuff with Regan and the possession very specifically is very scary. I genuinely think that stuff is just frightening. But I think that there's so much more to The Exorcist. It's a very strong family drama. The entire engine that runs that movie is not the scares. It's not the possession. It's the relationship between the mother and the daughter. Which is actually in some ways mirrored by the relationship between I think his name is Father Karras. I just want to make sure that I have that right. Father Jason Miller. He was, yeah, Damien Karras. Okay. But it mirrors him and his own mother, and there's so many different things that you can take from this. But like, the reason that it is scary, again, not just because of the possession stuff, is because in many ways the stuff that is happening with excuse me, Chris, or not Chris, but well, I guess you could put Chris in there as well. But with Regan, is that she is very much a innocent child who is being tormented by things. Whether you want to talk about the actual like possession elements there, or if you want to talk about the sort of like things that they talk about within the movie with results or with regards to the medical issues that they might be going on with like psychological issues that might be going on with Regan, like putting her faith in medicine, putting her faith in religious sorts of institutions, things of that nature. Like, the whole movie is really about faith and what you put put your faith in. And there is just some of the most interesting and scary fucking sequences in horror movie history that aren't even revolving around the possession stuff. Like that angiography scene where they stick blood, or they put a needle into Regan's neck and then blood spurts out. Like, that is horrifying to watch. Like, the scary part of that entire sequence where she's going around and trying to figure out what's wrong with her daughter has nothing to do with the possession stuff. It has to do with like these horrific things that they're putting this child through, and like how it isn't even like helping. It's not even helping the situation. It's not doing anything other than making the situation worse. I really, really, really think that this movie is astounding. I think that the use of tubular bells is perfectly employed here. It's actually only in, I think, 2 scenes. One in the middle of the movie and one at the very end. I think that it is in many ways similar to Poltergeist, responsible for a lot of the I guess psychological scars that I have as an adult. It is easily one of the best movies I have ever seen. Period. It is easily one of the scariest movies that I have ever seen. And I really think that, like, The Exorcist in so many ways has become a sort of cultural touchstone for American cinema, and has also in, again, many ways become a touchstone in just popular culture. I don't think that you get movies like Beyond the Door or I forget what the Leslie Nielsen sort of like parody version of this is. Let me look that up real quick. What's the name of that movie? Leslie Nielsen, Possession, Repossessed. That's it. Repossessed. I don't think that you get that movie. I don't think that you get like all of these really I don't know. With a lesser movie, I'll put it this way. With a lesser movie, I don't think that you get people making fun of it for years and years and years. I don't think that you get people trying to replicate its success for years and years and years. I think that this movie is a touchstone because of just how excellent it is. I think it's, I said it before, I think it's the best horror movie ever made. It is absolutely horrifying. I still, to this day, refuse to watch it alone. And I don't really like watching it at night. Yeah, it is. It's incredible. It's a very excellent movie. One of the very best to ever do it. So, yes, that wraps everything up for my special episode here. I want to thank you guys for listening along and just being here to converse with me. We'll be back again, hopefully relatively soon, with a regularly scheduled episode where we'll talk about video games and not just horror movies. Heyo! So, with that said, I want to give a very special shout out to our patrons who make all of this possible. Justin Ruiss, Tonny, Sulmann, Jeffery, Szyarto, Bren, Woodham, Dylan Martin, and Austin Stevens. Seriously, thank you so much. The show literally would not be possible without you. If you want to be part of the Patreon, you can go over to patreon.com/culturebop. We got some really cool, good stuff going on over there. We just finished up last month, I believe, our tournament. Or, well, not last month, not October, but in September. We finished up the Patreon exclusive tournament. The winner of that was Control. So, at some point next year, a piece of media about Control will inevitably come out. I mentioned the YouTube earlier. I'm pushing very hard to have the Final Fantasy video done by Christmas. I want to make that available to everyone as a sort of thank you for sticking around and hearing me out. Yeah. This has been a long process. We've still got a lot of things to get right. But I'm trying. So, yep. That's going to do it. I don't want to take up any more of your time than I have to. So until next time, goodbye.